So through movie magic, like 3 days had passed. In those 3 days, I'm still trying to get this goddamn steering column to work. So this is the one that I got out of the junkyard. I may have mentioned it, but I've been searching for an automatic square body column now for like 6 months. And you'd think this be easy, but no, they're extinct. Every square body in the local junkyards is stripped the second it shows up. Now everyone and their cousin wants one of these things. So the parts are just completely gone. There's bare cabs and frames in the junkyard, and that's it. So the last time we were at the yard, as we're leaving, Corey just happens to look over at like the pile of vehicles they're getting ready to pull motors out of, and lo and behold, there's a yellow square body plow truck there that's automatic. So I pulled this column out of it, or we pulled this column out of it. And I mean, it wasn't really great. Just cut the shaft off that goes down the boss because it was just pure rust. The key was missing, so I had to mess around with putting a lock cylinder in it, which sucked. I actually tried to clean this up. It doesn't look like much, but it was much worse. Kind of shined up the chrome for the ladies. But this stupid thing's broken. The past hour or two has been me trying to get this shaft out of it, which somehow decided it was cold outside and wanted to become an innie, and it went way up inside the column. I didn't know that could happen, but hey, I guess I can. It's probably part of the collapsible steering column setup in it. So when I pulled this cap off, there's a bearing right here, and that just fell apart on the floor. It hasn't been a bearing in a long time. It was just shell and erase and then rust. So I pulled the bearing out of the 3-speed manual column, and surprisingly enough, it was the same bearing, even though the rest of this stuff seems to be different. The steering shaft might be the same, I'm not sure. But here's the remnants of it on the floor. So there's like the outer piece, there's the inner piece, and that was the bearing. That goodie's there. So I think it's about to be take 3 on reinstalling this thing back in the truck. I successfully wrangled the thing back in the truck. That's the steering shaft that was in the truck off the 73 column. So I guess I lucked out with the steering column that I got. It must be a pre-77 or 73 through 77. Because I found out the 78s through 80 or 81, it's a different length. I don't know if it's longer or shorter, but if this fit, it's the right column. And there's a little bracket right under there. You can see where those fresh washers are. That supports the column right there, and it goes up into the firewall. And it's all back in here too. The grimy steering wheel's on there. I gotta find a replacement for that. But everything seems to function. The only thing that's different is the turn signal wire connector. This won't plug into the one in the truck. The wires are the same color in the same order on the new column and the old column. And same with the ones on the truck. I don't know if I can reach the vehicle. It's hidden up there. But yeah, they're the same color, just for some reason the connector is different. So I guess I could just swap the connector off the old column on this one. I could just pop these wires out, because I'm assuming it's wired the same if all the colors are the same on both columns. Just this one has a little extra tab, like somehow it locks in differently. So that's weird. But all the rest of the electrical connectors fit right on this column. So I guess now I'll continue my wiring adventure. So here is the truck original wiring. This went like all over the motor. Like this was, I think, one of the alternator wires. Well, I don't know what that was, what that did. Here's your charge wire off the alternator. You can see this fresh wire is from some of the repairs I had to do while the truck still had the small block in it. Here's like the excitement field wires for the alternator. From what I can tell, like all of this, I probably don't need it all. These are the wires off the truck that go down to the starter. So here's like your main power feed to the truck. It goes up to this fusible link here. It's bypassed like they all are for some reason. This black wire, I have no idea what this does. But this also goes to the power on the starter. And both these just kind of go into the fuse box backing back there. So this must be some other kind of power draw. This is the fuel gauge wire, which is in that harness. And then the purple wire is the starter, starter trigger wire, So when power goes to this, it goes on the little terminal, the starter down there. And that's what actually triggers your starter to, you know, spin. So here are the wires that were down before. I cut the harness right here because this was like obnoxiously long. I already cut over a foot out of this. You can see it's still like that long. So they must have really wrapped this like all the way around the transmission down there and used up a lot of wire. I don't need to do that. So I cut that. Plus all this wire is kind of grimy, so as short as I make it, the better to get rid of all this worn out factory wire. So I'm going to give myself some slack and then splice it back in. Plus it let me slip the heat insulation over it easy. Okay, I got them all shortened up, shrink wrapped and such, all proper. I like using these things. I've been using them for years over like the regular crimp terminals or soldering. They're basically like the inside of a butt connector. They have them for ring terminals and everything too. But these are nice because they don't really make a big bulbous mess on the wire, and then you can seal them using shrink wrap completely. So in the end, I mean, to me, it's as good of a connection to soldering. And it's a lot quicker. I think it turns out better. I never have any luck soldering anything. I just make this giant like wart on the wire and it falls apart. I don't know. These work pretty good. So that's how I joined them. And so you can see the shrink wrap. Should be good. I'll tie it up here a little bit. I don't know what I'm going to do with the rest of this yet. That'll come later. But here's all the wiring. So in this mess is part of the PSI harness. It has those two powers that come off of those red wires right there. And then it has the factory truck. These four, well, this is the gas gauge. These three are down there. And then I have the positive battery cable in this one. And this is the alternator charge, which I'll also tie up a little better. But that's looping over from the charge lug on the alternator. So that should conclude the positive battery underhood wiring fiasco. In theory, it should crank if I hook the battery cables up. It should also not light on fire if I hook the battery cables up. But I guess either of those yet to be proven. Oh, okay, the headlights are on for some reason. Don't see any smoke. Guess let's see what happens. I have no idea where I put the headlight stem for the switch, so I guess those are staying on for the foreseeable future. But the good news is, so far, both my promises are true. It hasn't lit on fire, and it'll crank. Still on fire. Yep, no fire. You can totally tell how confident I am about that. So now that I had the column in, I have to engineer a shifter. That little arm right there, that is the shifter arm that's connected to the shifter in the truck. So when you move the shifter on the column shifter, like, you know, move it around, it rotates like a sleeve in the column and it moves that. And then from the factory, there was a bar that went from that down to like a cantilever setup that got pinched between the transmission and the frame. Or at least that's how GM normally does it. Now, being this was a manual truck, I don't have any of that stuff. So like the obvious solution would just be to modify whatever stock automatic linkage it had, or try and find one of these trucks that came with a 4L80 in the junkyard and rob that out of it. Because I had to try and get down to that lever right there in the transmission. That's what moves in the transmission to make it shift. So instead of trying to track down that stuff, it's probably impossible to find anymore like everything else, I'll show you what I bought. I got this Locar universal column shifter setup. Although it's not really universal, it is actually for GM. I know it only says, 350, 400, and 700 and all that there. But according to the Locar listings, it says this will work on a 4L60, a 4L80, etc. So basically, you install this lever on the transmission, and then this stuff goes up to that lever on the column, and you cut and bend this rod until it reaches it and works. It takes some adjusting to get to, appropriately line up with the marks on the dashboard there for what gear you're in. I was first introduced to these because Corey has one in the Tempest, and then he bought like an Amazon version for the Checker, and that one wasn't, I wasn't terribly impressed by that. So I just bought this Locar one. So now I'm going to have some shiny billet stuff in the engine bay for no reason that you're not going to be able to see. But I've never installed one of these before, so I guess I'll take a crack at it. So on this end, you put this little hind joint with, they call them Delran washers, which are lipped and go right into this arm here. You just nut and bolt it, and that's on. And then at the bottom, the other end goes. Here's the arm they give you for the bottom, and then the other hind joint here. They just tell you to remove the original shift arm, which is this. Initial complaint is that in the directions they show if you have a 6L80, they have an arm that's like an L when it comes out, so the bolt doesn't hit the pan. Well, on this 4L80, the bolt hits the pan. So I can't adjust this any farther up this slot than right there, so it really limits my adjustment. So we'll see if it'll be okay or not. But I guess they should probably tell you to use the 6L80 or 6L90, whatever it is, kit for the 4L80, because this doesn't really work right. But it looks like it's a pretty straight shot. I already kind of laid the bar in here. I'm going to have to put like one bend in it to kind of have it come out this way and then shoot straight down into this, because it's too hard of an angle. It's pushing both the joints over all the way to the one side. So if I can get this to straighten out a little bit, it should be golden. Well, I've only been working on it about 10 or 15 minutes, and it's actually perfect. Required very little fiddling. Turns out if you actually read the directions, I mean, I read them kind of. I guess I skimmed them, let's say. But this actually does fit. If you don't put the washer behind the head of the bolt head actually fits in there and recesses in, and then it will clear. Has the added bonus of holding the bolt for you while you turn the nut on. So yeah, I had to put one little bend in it. It's really hard to see. It's like a slight bend, and it was like dead on. The rod engages in, both the screws touch, you can tighten them down. All these adjustments, there's adjustment here and adjustment on the other hind joint. They're both right in the middle of their adjustment ranges. I didn't have to mess with them, so that's good. I just want to pull these out, these set screws back out, and put some like blue Loctite on them, because I'm a little paranoid about them falling out and me losing my shifter in the middle of nowhere. That's a lock nut, and the bolt up there won't come out. And being that this is a jam nut, this shouldn't be able to turn to come out, so I shouldn't have to worry about that. But yeah, I'll go in the interior and I'll show you how it works. Turned out better than I expected. It's nice not having the floor in it. Gives you some easy access to look at the thing shifting. But I threw the gauge cluster in momentarily because trying to make sure this all lines up. But there you go. Park, reverse, neutral, fourth, third, second, and that's all you got because this is only a 3-speed column. But yeah, it works pretty good. See if we can get an action down there. Yeah, that was pretty easy. This Locar thing is pretty nifty. Okay, back inside to this mess. Here is the fuse and relay panel that comes in the PSI harness. It should have come with fuses and relays installed in it, from what I can tell, and I asked some people and all theirs did. Of course, mine was empty, so I had to go pick up fuses and relays last night. Good news is the directions show what fuse goes where. And then you have to terminate these lines going into the fuel pump relay. That wire there, the one I taped to the harness, that's my like feed to the actual fuel pump that goes under the truck. And then the other one here has to go to a switch or constant hot. I think I'll just run it to a switch just as like an extra safety. And then this little wire here pretty much triggers all of the LS electronics turn on. Triggers this whole panel, the ECU, all that. This also gets run to an ignition or accessory hot, something that comes on with the key and turns off when you turn the key off. And then there's also ground wires here that I gotta ground to something. I'm just gonna try and like lay this all out and just hook it up temporarily to see if I can fire the engine. I don't want to put the radiator in and all that, because then it will guarantee the motor's junk if I go through all that work and waste antifreeze. So I'm going to fire it with no radiator. I'm going to loop the trans lines up front like I have them in the trans here. I'm just going to put a rubber hose on them, fill the trans with fluid so I don't burn that up, but still not hose fluid everywhere. And I got to plug the tack module in to the pedal and then the tack module into the harness here. And that should be good enough to fire it up. We could hope for the best. Okay, I have it all rigged up. ECU's plugged in, tack modules plugged in. Plugged in my little scan tool here, and there's power going to the port. It's probably not going to communicate. Yeah, it doesn't. Okay, because the key's not on. That's a good sign. The computer isn't on all the time. So let's just see what happens if we turn the key on. The fuel pump should prime. Hey, look at that. Cycle it a few times here and I'll see if there's any terrible leaks. I don't hear anything hosing on the floor. I think that's just the fuel returning to the tank. Let's see. Yep, we have fuel pressure. Looks like about 45 pounds. Don't see any leaks. There we go. There's a chance here that it might start. Well, there we go, we have contact. Wasn't too bad. Just surveying any leaks here. I don't see it shooting anything out anywhere. No trans fluid, no oil. Floor is still clear. Guess I can let it run a little longer. Don't want to get it too hot because there's no coolant in it, but I mean, yeah, maybe like a minute or so to run it before it's going to do anything. See what happens if I let it run a little longer. Well, not too bad. I started a few times. It seems happy. I just run it for a few seconds so it doesn't, do anything dumb. I put like 10 quarts of trans fluid in it. It's still showing low, but I put 10 quarts in it. And I ran it through the gears, even on the wheelie dealies. I like tempting fate. But it does engage, reverse, and drive. So it at least has reverse and first to a point. I don't know if they slip, but something happens. It's not a complete box of neutrals, at least. So now I have to put the radiator in it and the hoses. The LS squarebody page is a write-up of which hoses to use. And I got to change the temperature sensor out. There's a special one I have to use to make my gauge work. It's from a Camaro. I'll explain that in another video. I'm going to have a whole thing on just making the gauge cluster I got work. But yeah, not too bad. I guess the biggest hurdle is over. Now it's just all the details. Cooling system, air conditioning, the exhaust, other things to make it livable. But yeah, not bad. I guess when we rejoin this project, I'll be putting the cooling system in it and letting it run a little bit longer.